I'm Warren. This is Charlie. He can hear, I can see, we work together.
I constantly quote Warren, and everybody always loves it. I said, you take the high road, it's uncrowded.
We knew we were sort of made for each other, and we've never had an argument in this whole time. We are strong-minded.
The way to get a good partner was to be a good partner. And these are very old-fashioned ideas. And they just work so fabulously well.
Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, friends for more than 6 decades, business partners for more than 5, together sitting atop one of the country's biggest companies, Berkshire Hathaway. Buffett, the chairman and CEO, known as the Oracle of Omaha, amassed a more than $100 billion fortune running the conglomerate, acquiring stocks and companies from his office in Omaha, Nebraska. And Vice Chairman Munger, who grew up less than a mile from Buffett, a lawyer by training but an investor by practice. They met as adults after Munger had moved to his current home, Los Angeles. From 1,500 miles apart, the duo built Berkshire Hathaway from a single textile mill to a $650 billion powerhouse. Running companies from railroad operator Burlington Northern Santa Fe and insurance company Geico to Fruit of the Loom, Dairy Queen, and Clayton Homes. And managing a portfolio of $300 billion in shares of companies like Apple, Bank of America, and Coca-Cola. Tonight, we bring you the story of perhaps their greatest accomplishment, 60 years of friendship and the lessons they've learned from each other along the way in business and life. 90-year-old Buffett, a man of many words, and 97-year-old Munger, a man of fewer, but his are more pointed.
I would rather throw a viper down my shirt front than hire a compensation consultant. Well, I think he's demented. You can't form a business partnership with your thriftless, drunken brother-in-law,
Buffett and Munger's outspoken nature and their refusal to chase hot market fads that stray from fundamental market analysis don't always win them friends, like their take on Bitcoin.
Bitcoin is worthless artificial gold.
It's ingenious, and blockchain is important, but Bitcoin has no unique value at all. It doesn't produce anything. You can stare at it all day and no little Bitcoins come out or anything like that. It's a delusion, basically.
I think I should say modestly that I think the whole damn development is disgusting and contrary to the interests of civilization.
And while the pair delivered market-beating performances with the Berkshire portfolio for 4.5 decades, they have lagged the S&P 500 for the last 5 and 10 years, leading some to question whether they've lost their touch. They're not concerned.
I'm quite comfortable holding Berkshire. I think our businesses are better than the average in the market.
We asked Munger and Buffett their thoughts on some of the latest headlines in the business world, those that could have a lasting impact on how markets operate, beginning with Credit Suisse's $5.5 billion loss stemming from its business with Archegos Capital Management.
Think of how massively stupid that was. And of course, it was the lure of the really easy money that the idiot was paying you, being the prime broker for a jerk. But he was a convicted insider trader that came out of the craziest part of the hedge fund industry. And they were getting unusual profits by extending unusual credit. I mean, it was just, the world was shouting at them, crook, fool, and they didn't listen. They thought this is where the easy money is, crooks and fools.
There's one rule
we don't like either.
We learned a long time ago, is that you can't make a good deal with a bad person. Just forget it. Now, if you think you can draw up a contract that is going to work against a bad person, they're going to win. For one thing, they probably enjoy litigation, but Berkshire Hathaway as an entity, or me personally, I think, we don't want to spend our life, doing that sort of thing. And besides, the bad guys win. They know more games. They may lose eventually, but it's no way to spend your life.
Charlie, it wasn't just Credit Suisse that got pulled in by that. There were a lot of firms that were doing business with Archegos, and
Yes, they were all foolish, but Credit Suisse has managed to be the biggest fool of all.
Well, Becky, if you
a lot of competition for that order.
In
1934,
after the Great Crash, well, 1932 and 3, they held these hearings, and they decided that unusual amounts of leverage were one cause of the problem in the 1929, and that it could pose dangers even to the economy. So they gave the Federal Reserve Board the right to establish how much people could borrow against stocks, margin requirements.
Which was a very good idea.
It was a terrific idea. And they
Totally
used
sound.
the Federal Reserve between 1934 and 1973 used that power, I think, 23 or 24 times. They even raised margins to 100%. But they were the regulators of determining whether excess leverage might have systemic problems associated with it. And then, the rule in 1973 or 4 was 50%. The rule today is 50%. It has, in the last 40 plus years, first 40 some years, it had 23 changes. They went to 100%. They went down to 20. All kinds. Then it was a signal to the economy and all kinds of things. And essentially, Wall Street figured out how to get around that.
They lobbied through changes in the law
Yeah.
so they could have unlimited leverage and keep the transactions off the books and subject to murky accounting.
The banks would say, we made it through this, we absorbed all the problems ourselves, and many of us, it won't even take a substantial hit on the balance sheet for it. What
Well,
would
there's
you?
an old the story about all these banks that think they've done so well. These two guys are fighting with razors, and one takes a big swipe, and the other guy says, "You missed me," and the guy says, "Wait until you shake your head."
So what would you tell regulators today? What would you
Well,
do?
the regulators aren't, but they need to change laws now. But of course, if you're running a gambling parlor, you want the big players to gamble more furiously. And that's what the securities business allowed people to do. It was a big mistake. It created a lot of misery. We don't want to suck people into gambling for way more than they can afford. And you get into clearance. There were clearance risks in the thing. The whole market was in chaos. The people who are making money out of this unreasonable extension of credit argue for it, and nobody's speaking against it. Now, last time around, we got the correct regulation that came and stayed for a long time on margin debt, only because we had the worst depression in the history of the English-speaking world. That's what it took to get a little sense into the politicians. This time around, it's just the total return swap.
So what fixes it, though? I mean, there have been suggestions that there needs to be
Well,
more
we fixed
transparency. There needs to be really a crackdown on allowing people to lever up like this. What's the
correct
answer?
answer was never to have allowed most of this stuff to start.
But
You allow the wrong kind of stuff to start, and it runs on you.
it is tough to be, very, very, very tough to be a regulator. To really go after the big stuff, you're attacking the profit center of institution after institution after institution.
The prime brokerage thing, by its nature, means you're specializing in lending to the big swingers. And of course it's dangerous. And the rules they violated, the same guy was doing 4 or 5 brokers at once, and of course he was buying stocks to keep them up to prevent margin calls. And once you start doing that, you're headed for an ugly ending, and of course it happened.
But do you think that it would take a systemic breakdown before changes would actually get implemented again, like you referenced with the Great Depression?
The last time it took the worst depression in the English-speaking world in all history. That's what it took to get the last correction. I certainly don't want that.
Now,
A wise regulator stops this stuff before it starts.
it's very hard to stop.
What interests me in this is that the communist Chinese behave the way I am talking in favor of. And our own wonderful free enterprise economy is letting all these crazy people go to this gross excess.
Becky,
The people who are not avoiding it are the communist Chinese.
Oh.
They step in preemptively to stop speculation.
Charlie, you said communist China is doing all the things that we should be doing right now, and I can't help but think of what they've done to Jack
That
Ma.
amuses me, you know.
Well, what about what they've done to Jack Ma? He's kind of disappeared as...
Well, yes, but Jack Ma is one of the swingers. So they just they said, the hell with you. he basically gave a speech when he said to a one-party state, well, you guys are a bunch of jerks, don't know what you're doing, and I know what I'm doing, and I'm going to do it better. And he was going to wade into banking and no rules and just do whatever he pleased.
He also brought banking to a lot of
the
unbanked
Chinese
people.
communists did the right thing. They just called in Jack Ma and say, you aren't going to do it, Sonny. And I wish we had I don't want all of the Chinese system, but I certainly would like to have the financial part of it in my own country.
Although Ant Financial was bringing banking to a huge unbanked population before. I mean, there were things that they were doing that...
I know, but you don't want a swinger to run. The banks have the implicit guarantee of the government, and you don't want to let any swinger run a bank. Let the swingers do something else.
Who are the swingers here in this country?
Well, I don't want to start naming swingers.
They'll appear.
You know, the way the story has kind of been painted is that it's the Chinese communists who don't want to lose power and some of the capitalists who have maybe gained too much power under at least what the communists might like to see.
Both groups want more power, not less. But
Politicians in this country want more power, and the rich want more power.
yes. No, what's so different in China? Yeah. But the banking system, take shadow banking, which we have in this country. People say, well, it's the unbanked. Well, the whole leveraged buyout lending operation practically left the banks and went to shadow banks in our own country. And it hasn't caused any big trouble yet, but I'll be amazed if it doesn't.
Well, Jamie Dimon has said that, and like look out for some of the fintech areas that they're not
Yes, I
regulated.
agree with Jamie Dimon on that. I don't think allowing all the swingers in the world to act as though they're banks is a good idea.
Which maybe we should talk about Robinhood and some of the areas that come up.
Robinhood is beneath contempt.
Why?
Well, it's a gambling parlor masquerading as a respectable business.
And the pushback on that is always, this is a way of getting average people into the markets.
Well,
people
of
who didn't have
course you don't
access.
want to say it's a gambling parlor, but it is a gambling parlor.
It's not encouraging people to buy a very, very, very low-cost index fund and hold it for 50 years. I will guarantee you that you will not walk in there, get that advice. Instead, you'll get advice on how you can trade options, and they'll tell you that...
And it's telling people they aren't paying commissions when the commissions are simply disguised in the trading. It's basically a sleazy, disreputable operation. And the interesting thing about it is that some good people you would be glad to have marry into your family have backed it.
When we return, it's one of the biggest companies in the world, but its headquarters is home to just 24 people, and it has almost none of the conventional corporate structure found at most public companies. But first, Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger grew up just miles from each other in Omaha. How they met, next.
Both of our wives thought, my God, another one.
Before Ben and Jerry, Oprah and Gail, or Sergey Brin and Larry Page, there was Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. Born and raised in Omaha, Nebraska, both worked at Buffett's grandfather's grocery store, but their paths didn't cross until Buffett was 29 years old and Munger was 35. To understand the most successful couple in business, it's best to start at the beginning and how they first met.
Well, want to tell a story?
Go ahead.
There was a doctor couple, very prominent in Omaha, and his name was Eddie Davis, her name was Dorothy Davis, and it was Mrs. Davis that called me naturally. She did everything. And she said, we've heard that you manage money, and we'd be kind of interested in listening to your story about how you do it and what we might do with you. So I went over, and I talked to him, and I was all full of myself, and I couldn't talk fast enough about stocks in those days. And Dorothy Davis, very smart, and she listened to every word. And the doctor was kind of over in the corner spinning a yo-yo or something, and not paying much attention. And the wife looked over at the doctor, and he said, I'm going to give him $100,000. And I was managing about $500,000 at the time, so it was a big deal. And in a very nice way, I said, Dr. Davis, I said, you know, you really haven't been paying much attention to what I've been saying and everything. I kind of like to know why you're giving me this $100,000. It was much more modest than that, the way I edged into it. And Dr. Davis looked at me and he said, well, he says, you remind me of Charlie Munger. And I said, well, I don't know who Charlie Munger is, but I like him. And he gave me $100,000. And then they told me about Charlie and what as a young kid, how he would be over there asking him questions on medicine and giving him lectures on all. I mean, they clearly loved him. And it sort of became their mission that sometime they wanted to get me and Charlie together. So Charlie, in 1959, his dad died, and he came back to Omaha. His mother lived there, and the Davises really got us together. And so they arranged a dinner. About 5 minutes into it, Charlie was sort of rolling on the floor laughing at his own jokes, which is exactly the same thing I did. So I'm not going to find anything out like this. And we just hit it off.
Charlie, what did they first tell you about Warren? How did they describe him to you?
Well, the Davises were like a second set of parents to me. There were 2 sets of 3 children. My father's best friend was Eddie Davis. My mother's best friend was Mrs. Davis. I lived in that house back and forth as though it were an alternate house of the Mungers. And Mrs. Davis gave me the honor of switching my legs when I misbehaved, just as if I were one of her own.
You probably gave her plenty of cause, too.
Anything the Davises asked me to do, I was going to do.
What did you think of Warren when you first met him?
We got along fine.
Oh, well. Both of our wives thought, my God, another one.
What I like about Warren is the irreverence. We don't have automatic reverence for the pompous heads of all civilization.
Is that something that came with age, or you
We
guys
were
were
always
born
that
with
way.
that?
We were kind of always the way. We were a little more extreme. I've learned to behave a little bit better. Charlie really hasn't learned to be much better. But, you know, I just knew instantly Charlie was the kind of guy that I was going to like him and I was going to learn from. But you know, it wasn't anything calculated decision or anything like that. That it was natural, and we have had nothing but fun.
Fun both as friends and business partners. A few years after meeting Munger, Buffett, who had grown his investment partnership into more than $250,000, found Berkshire Hathaway. He started buying stock in the textile mill in 1962 and took ownership of it in 1965. Around the same time, Munger had given up his career as a lawyer and had been running his own investment firm. That is, until Buffett convinced him to shutter it and join him at Berkshire. So how did the business relationship start?
Well, Warren had scorn for my way of making a living, and he was correct in that. It took me a long time to wise up that he had a better way of making a living than I did. But he finally convinced me that I was wasting my time.
As a lawyer?
Yeah.
I told him it was okay as a hobby, but not the real way to spend his time. He more or less decided to duplicate in Los Angeles what I was doing in Omaha, which was great. We just connected, and we talked a long time on the phone when it was expensive to talk on the phone. I didn't sit there with an hourglass, but with Charlie, I mean, my family could tell when Charlie was calling. We'd go on for a long, long time.
And we had fun in the early days because it was like hunting expeditions. And we had a lot of fun.
One of the world's biggest companies started as a textile mill, building an empire from gowns and gloves to stamps.
We bought Berkshire stock and we bought blue chip stock and eventually put it all together. It looked like a plate of spaghetti at one time, which was not good.
Over the 66 years Warren Buffett has run Berkshire Hathaway, he's made hundreds of deals. But believe it or not, he says acquiring Berkshire Hathaway itself was his worst trade ever.
The truth is, I had now committed a major amount of money to a terrible business. And Berkshire Hathaway became the base for everything pretty much that I've done since. So in 1967, when a good insurance company came along, I bought it for Berkshire Hathaway. I really should have bought it for a new entity, because Berkshire Hathaway was carrying this anchor of all these textile assets. So Initially, it was all textile assets that weren't any good, and then gradually we built more things onto it. But always we were carrying this anchor, and for 20 years I fought the textile business before I gave up. And if instead of putting that money into the textile business originally, we just started out with the insurance company, Berkshire would be worth twice as much as it is now.
From that first deal, Buffett, soon joined by Charlie Munger, continued to buy stock in undervalued companies. The two say they often learned more from their mistakes, as was the case from one of Buffett and Munger's first deals together, blue chip stamps.
Well, we bought into blue chip stamps together with we had a third friend there, Rick Guerin, and pretty soon the three of us together had most of the stock. And one thing led to another. Blue chip stamp is now part of Berkshire. And of course, the trading stamp business has disappeared. All the early businesses that we owned together have disappeared.
They didn't disappear, they failed.
They failed, yeah.
Yeah, right.
but we took so much out of them before they failed that it still worked out fine for us.
We evolved them. I mean, but literally, the three base businesses all ended up disappearing. They went out of business. They no longer fit into society in a sense. And actually, the very first deal that we joined in on was something called diversified retailing, which was in Baltimore. We bought a department store there. And we had Sandy Gottesman had 10%, Charlie had 10%, and in his partnership, he had 10%. And I had 80% in our partnership, and the three of us. And we always treated it as, we may have had 80, but we were equal partners. We put $6 million into that. We called it diversified retailing, but we only had one department store chain. But we had, and we had a lot of fun with that. But we also saw, after we were in a little while, this department store.
As the ink dried, we realized we'd made a big mistake. Didn't take very long.
Yeah.
Why? What happened?
Well, you heard the old story. They said, let me out of this trap. I decided I don't like the cheese. We just wised up the fact that it was one tough business we'd bought into, and that the sellers had made the good decision. We'd made a bad one.
We had some terrific people who were running it for us. They were actually related to Sandy's wife.
Exceptionally honorable people.
Really honorable people, and smart. If you're
Yes.
losing money in a business with a smart, decent person, we got a problem. I mean, that's the business. Use the smart, decent person to move them over some other place and move the capital some other place. And
The company was not yet losing money, but we soon realized it was about to lose money.
yeah. And so we sold the department store. It went out of business in 1983, but Hutzler's, which was the silk stocking department store, they went out of business in, 1985 or something. They're gone. And the people there, quite understandably, wanted to build more branch stores, but you don't want to put more money into a business that's destined for failure. Now, we put $6 million of capital in that, and it was a dumb decision, everything. But that's $6 million. What would it be worth now, Charlie? They got 4/10 of a share.
A great many billions.
Oh, it's tens of billions.
Yeah.
Now, if the department store had succeeded, we'd have a nice little business to send us a little check. But because it failed, we made we made more than 25 billion in that. It didn't look like it at the time, though.
So when you realized it was a mistake, what did you do? How did you address it?
We asked Sandy, who was the best salesman among us, to go sell it. and we sold it, and we put the money into Berkshire.
We got about 95% of our money back.
Yeah, and we'd borrowed $6 million in there, so now we bought Berkshire stock and we bought blue chip stamp stock, and we eventually put it all together. It looked like a plate of spaghetti at one time, which was not good. It was just complicated, and so we put them all together. And I've still got stock, and Charlie still got stock that came out of diversified retailing, as do a number of my partners from the old days. Best thing that happened to us was that this place failed. Obviously, was a failure.
Why? What did you learn?
Pardon me?
Leave quickly.
Yeah, and use the capital someplace else.
One thing we've learned is if it's clear that something is a mistake, is to fix it quickly. It doesn't get better while you wait.
When they built Berkshire, they created a new model.
We have created the decentralization because it suited our nature.
Absolutely.
But first, everything Buffett and Munger need to know about life, they learned from two men.
You want to have certain people in life that you don't want to disappoint.
I learned how hard it is to work for 10 hours for $2.
We shoveled wet deep, heavy snow all around. We had these driveways and everything at the store. I went to my grandfather and he said, well, how much should I pay you boys? Because a dime's too little and a dollar's too much. The main thing we learned from the grocery store was we didn't want to work at a grocery store.
Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger agree a lot of their outlook on life comes from their Midwestern upbringing. They credit their success to a deep sense of values which have kept them grounded throughout their careers, associating with good people in business and in life, and to taking the high road in business transactions.
If the high road is way more profitable, do you deserve a lot of credit for choosing it? People get the credit of the people who take it even when it's painful.
Both say these values were instilled at a young age thanks to a key figure in each of their lives.
Long, long ago, people don't even know about this, but we owned two small insurance companies at Berkshire that both went broke, except we didn't let them go broke. I mean, in other words, we could have walked away from them and left money because they were separate companies, and we didn't walk away. We haven't spent our lifetime, working at things to try and figure out ways to walk away from debts or have things in indentures and play games like they have, with credit default swaps, to figure out ways to take advantage of the lenders. It's just not our game. If we owe money, we're going to pay it back.
You said that it would occur to you both that it was the more profitable way, but that's certainly not necessarily how the majority of people in business think.
It's the way our dads thought in both cases. Who the hell knows where you get your values from exactly, but basically, you have a few people that are teachers to you in life and are not formal teachers, and the most important people are generally your parents. And I never heard my dad say to me in my life, be sure you pay all your debts, but I just watched how he lived. And you want to have certain people in life that you don't want to disappoint. You want to have people that make you a better person than you otherwise would be. And Charlie does that for me now, but my dad did it for me early on. I didn't know his dad, but from everything I've heard about his dad, he had the same experience.
Charlie, tell me more about your dad.
Well, my father was a lawyer, and he was the son of another lawyer who became the only federal judge in Lincoln, Nebraska, which is Nebraska's capital city. And Grandfather Munger was a marvelous guy and a great family man, too. I was surrounded by high-grade people, and my parents had good friends who were high-grade people. So I had a very privileged life in terms of my associations. In fact, I had terrible trouble by coming out to Los Angeles and succeeding in life. I frequently thought I couldn't ever get a group of friends that were as good as my father had gotten in Little Omaha. And I finally realized that they had a very unusual bunch of friends in Omaha. And it was just a peculiar accident of history. So I was surrounded by a bunch of high-grade people. I deserved no credit at all for. I was just forced to imitate the right people.
Is it both Charlie and I? We like talking to older people all our lives. I mean, I liked when I was 7 or 8 years old talking to older people. And now, of course, the problem is there aren't any older people. So I've run out of that constituency. But if I would go over to the Dundee Presbyterian Church to sing in the kids' choir or something, walking home, I'd drop in at 4 or 5 houses where I'd talk to housewives, so I'd sit and talk to them. I've always enjoyed talking to older people. I think Charlie was the same way.
Of course. When I married the woman that helped me build this house, one of her relatives said after meeting me, she said, "That is the oldest young man I've ever known."
But I think
I always behaved like I was 100 years old, even when I was young.
But now we're the youngest old men that you'll run into.
Charlie, just the relationship that you have with your dad, too.
Oh, a marvelous relationship. And it's a great blessing to have a wonderful mother and a wonderful father, and they have a bunch of wonderful friends. It was just, I was very lucky.
We've been able to associate with people that we really like. That's one of the luxuries of life.
And we're still doing it.
And we're still doing it. We made a lot of money, but what we really wanted was independence. And we have had the ability since pretty much a little after we met financially, we could associate with people that we wanted to associate with. And if we associated with jerks, that was our problem, but we didn't have to. We've had that luxury now for 60 years or close to it, and that beats 25-room houses and 6 cars. Or that stuff is what really is great. Is if you can do what you want to do in life and associate with the people you want to associate with in life, and And we both had that spirit all the way through.
How quickly can you figure out if somebody is someone you want to associate with?
It's amazing how quickly we do it and how few bad mistakes we've made.
So what do you look for? What do you know?
I don't know exactly.
Yeah, how did I know Charlie? I knew when I met Charlie, after a few minutes in the restaurant that this guy was going to be in my life forever. I mean, we were going to have fun together. We were going to make money together. We were going to get ideas from each other. We were going to both behave better than if we didn't know each other.
Up next, working from home and lessons from the pandemic.
People don't know as much as they think they know, but the biggest thing you learn is that the pandemic was bound to occur, and this isn't the worst.
On the first Saturday in May, from the 1970s to 2019, Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger could be found here on stage in Omaha, Nebraska.
Good morning and welcome to Berkshire Hathaway.
Dubbed Woodstock for capitalists, the Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting grew in size from about 20 people in the National Indemnity lunchroom to more than 40,000 crowding into Omaha's biggest convention center. Until the COVID-19 pandemic forced the meeting, like everything else, to go virtual. In 2020, that meant Buffett ran the meeting without Munger.
This is the annual meeting of Berkshire Hathaway. It doesn't look like an annual meeting. It doesn't feel exactly like an annual meeting.
But this year, the two were back together on stage at a virtual meeting held in Munger's hometown of Los Angeles. We sat down with them after the meeting in Munger's backyard. They reflected on the pandemic's impact on business and on their own experiences working remotely.
The last year, you both had your lives changed pretty dramatically from the pandemic. Charlie, I hear you're pretty adept at Zoom.
Oh, I fall in love with Zoom.
How often do you talk to people on Zoom?
At least 3 times a day. I made a deal in Australia. I think Zoom is here to stay. It just adds so much convenience.
Well, particularly for 97, getting around. But Charlie and I have talked a lot, obviously, since the pandemic started. We haven't talked on Zoom yet. I mean,
But it's not because...
I'm his non-Zoom guy.
No.
Why don't you like Zoom?
I don't see any plus to it, particularly. And I did it once or twice, and they had a whole screen of people. I just didn't think it was adding experience. I'd rather have my, feet on the desk, and I find the telephone a very satisfactory instrument. I mean,
So how does life change post-pandemic? How does work change? And how does it go back to normal, I guess? What do you think happens?
Well, I think a lot of business travel will never come back. Just corporation after corporation deciding 1 meeting a year, 2 meetings a year in person and the rest Zoom. And I think that's here to stay. And of course, what's happened to office demand is just, think of the agonies in that field now. And a lot of people have found they don't need to be there. I think all kinds of things are going to happen that we don't go back to what we did before.
some of our businesses will change a lot, and some of them won't change hardly at all. It'll be interesting. I would say this, in terms of the whole pandemic, in terms of predicting both the economic and how the virus would behave, it surprised us in a lot of ways. It surprised, and we still don't know. We know a lot about this virus. There's a lot of things we don't know yet. And if you look at the graphs of how it's hit different countries and everything, it just shows you how a very advanced economically world can get disrupted by something that in ways that even when you're in it you can't predict. And the economic impact has been this extremely uneven thing where I don't know how many, but many hundreds of thousands or millions of small businesses have been hurt in a terrible way. Most of the big companies overwhelmingly have done fine unless they happen to be in cruise lines or or hotels or
But
something.
some people did better than we did. Again, the Chinese simply, totalitarian state, they simply shut down the country for 6 weeks. And that turned out to be exactly the right thing to do. And they didn't let any contact. You picked up your groceries in a box in the apartment, and that's all the contact you had with anybody for 6 weeks. And when it was all over, they kind of went back to work. It happened, they did it exactly right.
But there are other cases of shutdowns, and the shutdowns really they thought they were model examples, and then now they're experiencing problems. And then you had other countries, you know,
Yeah,
like
no,
you had other countries like
it's been
Sweden.
difficult.
Sweden says we're not going to do it, and they seem to be working fine for a while. And then this has been very, very, very unpredictable.
Very difficult, yeah.
And it's not over. I mean, in terms of the unpredictability, and in terms of the economic, it's been very unpredictable, but it's worked out better than people anticipated for most people and most businesses. And it's just, for no fault of their own, it's just decimated all kinds of people and their hopes. And those, we want to, you know, the government should
But
be
for
helping.
some
We're
businesses,
prosperous.
it didn't create just a return to normal. It created fabulous success they didn't anticipate. The auto dealers are coining money that they wouldn't have had except for the pandemic.
And all of the dealers, we have partners in each dealership, they very sincerely felt that they were going to have one hell of a problem in March and April. Some might have wanted to go in for the assistance from the government. We wouldn't let them because they're a rich parent. But they honestly believed it. We honestly believed it. We didn't know what was going to happen with NetJets in terms of the demand, and it's just been different than a lot of people thought. The banks were scared stiff in the middle of March. I mean, they saw everybody taking down their lines of credit. Why do people take down their lines of credit when they don't need it? Because they're afraid it won't be there next week. And if you get enough people believing something won't be there next week in banking, it won't be there next week, absent the Federal Reserve.
One thing that maybe surprised you most, something you learned the last year?
Well, I learned that people don't know as much as they think they know. But the biggest thing you learn is that the pandemic was bound to occur, and this isn't the worst one that's imaginable at all. Society has a terrible time preparing for things that are remote but are possible and will occur sooner or later. There'll be another pandemic. We know that. We know there's a nuclear, chemical, biological, and now cyber threat. And we, you know, each one of those has terrible possibilities. And we do some things about it, but it's just not something that society seems particularly capable and fully coming to grips with. The cyber threat, you know, that we've just started. and look at the damage that's already been done. Charlie and I have been ungodly lucky in many ways, but the luckiest thing was actually being around at this time and place. And we also have these problems on how to 200 countries with over 7.5 billion people, and a lot of tensions between them and all sorts of things, and different systems of selected governments and all that. And how do we actually do this so that mankind 50 and 100 and 200 years from now should enjoy the incredibly better life that could be enjoyed while not screwing it up?
Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger have spent half a century buying companies and then leaving them alone. The do-nothing secret to their success.
We have accidentally created a very interesting experiment in how well a really big place can be run on a very non-bureaucratic basis with extreme decentralization.
It's one of the 10 biggest companies in the world by market capitalization. Its 360,000 employees work in offices around the globe. But Berkshire Hathaway's sprawling operations are headquartered here from 2 floors leased in a building in Omaha, managed by a staff of just 24 people. It's different because of the 2 men at the top, Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger.
We have accidentally created a very interesting experiment in how well a really big place can be run on a very non-bureaucratic basis with extreme decentralization. We're like a test case for how extreme you can make it. And I would say so far that it's worked better. We get more advantages than disadvantages out of our hands-off management.
That's
You
true.
agree with that?
That's true. We get very few people that want to copy us.
No, nobody wants to copy us. And if people study us, they'd find it the way we're doing it, it works way better.
Yeah, it has certain disadvantages. And,
Yes.
when you trust people, occasionally trust is misused. But net, it's worked
It's a useful experiment that we've done, and I confidently predict that someday somebody will find out that some of this dumb bureaucracy could be eliminated. We'll be better off. Just as we found we can eliminate some business travel, we're going to find we can get rid of some dumb bureaucracy in American corporations.
It works at large scale, but it doesn't work to produce the kind of returns that, I mean, you can't, it isn't like we've got something that produces extraordinary returns, but it can be a very decent business at scale, operating in a way.
Don't you think we've done better than we would have been if we'd copied the centralized management system?
I wouldn't have wanted to work there.
I know. No, of course not.
I'd resigned or been fired.
Yeah.
No, I'd rather be in a jail cell with a few people that were interesting, and plenty of reading material.
No, what you're saying is we may have done it. We may have created the decentralization because it suited our nature.
Absolutely.
But we've accidentally created an experiment. Yeah. We've demonstrated that it can work on a big scale. That will eventually prove useful, I think.
You two have been friends for over 60 years. What's one thing that you really admire about the other?
Well, I like the humor and all that, but dependable is really important.
Warren, what do you admire about Charlie?
Really just the kind of person he has been. I mean, he has contributed to given individuals and also to society. I mean, he goes well beyond buying a stock and selling it higher. He's designed dormitories and helped build them. He's worked at hospitals and to understand how they can be made better and serve more people and do it at less cost. You know, it's an uphill fight all the time. But Charlie has worked on big problems, and he doesn't need to. And Charlie has never shaded anything he's told me, you know, since we met, in terms of presenting it to me in a different way than reality. Or he's never done anything I've seen that's self-serving in terms of being a partner or any kind of way. He makes me better than I would otherwise be. I don't want to disappoint
You had
him.
the same thing in reverse.
Well, it works. It does work that way. I mean, it's better to associate with people who are better than you are. I mean,
it really is. It really helps.
Business partners for more than half a century, Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger are lifelong teachers, corporate executives who lead in an unconventional manner and who will certainly be studied for generations to come. But with almost 190 years of experience between them, it is the lessons in life that they've shared through their friendship that may be more lasting.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.